Welcome once again to Heart of a Shepherd. I'm continuing to broadcast outside of Valley Forge in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and I surely appreciate you continuing to follow me, even if maybe the sound and the lighting might be off. Well, our scripture reading for today is Isaiah chapter 28 and 29, and the title of the devotional is A Portrait of Doom, Drunken, Narcissistic, Debauchery, Isaiah 28 and 29. Well, our chronological reading does return to the book of Isaiah. And for a few moments, let's review. Now, the prophet Isaiah was a contemporary of the prophets Jonah, Hosea, and Micah. Now, Isaiah's ministry spanned the reigns of 4 kings of Judah. Uzziah, also known in the scriptures as Azariah, was king of Judah beginning in 809 BC. And he reigned for an amazing 52 years. And then Jotham, the son of Uzziah, reigned for 16 years. And then Ahaz, who succeeded his father as king, reigned for 16 years. And then finally, the 4th king that reigned during the long ministry of Isaiah, his name was Hezekiah. He succeeded his father and was king of Judah for 29 years. Well, let's consider, if you would, Isaiah chapter 28. Now, let's begin with an overall title of this chapter, Reproof of Drunken Ephraim, Isaiah 28 and verses 1 through 13. Now, although Isaiah was primarily God's prophet to Judah, the opening prophecy of chapter 28 focused on Israel, now heralding God's judgment of Ephraim, Ephraim being the largest tribe of the northern 10 tribes of Israel. We read, Isaiah said, "Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine." Well, the pride of Ephraim in that first verse was probably Samaria, the capital city of the northern 10 tribes. Well, rather than spare Samaria, Isaiah foretold that the great city would be crushed and its beauty would fade like a flower. Well, as prophesied, the army of Assyria did sweep over the land of Israel, and we read as a tempest of hell and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing. Isaiah 28 and verse 2. Now, when I read, "The drunkards of Ephraim shall be trodden under feet," I remember the same befell the drunken revelers of ancient Babylon when the Medes and Persians conquered that great city in a night, recorded in Daniel chapter 5. Now, though Israel would be destroyed and its people taken captive, Isaiah prophesied a residue, literally a remnant, would be mercifully spared. Well, much like the politicians of our day, the leaders of Israel were a drunken lot, and we read that wine caused the priest and prophet to err and stumble in their judgment. Now, what an inglorious, disgraceful scene we're painted when we picture the debauchery of Israel's spiritual leaders. In fact, we go on and read a horrifying scene where it says, "And all tables," that is tables where this banqueting of wine, all tables full of vomit and filthiness, so that there was no place clean. Well, the debauchery is pictured in this, that it was known in the ancient times that people would drink and drink and drink of the wine, go out, throw it up, come back in, and continue to drink. And so the description that Isaiah gives of Israel in that time was vomit and filthiness. In fact, Isaiah asked, quote, "Whom shall I teach knowledge? And whom shall I make to understand doctrine?" Isaiah 28 and verse 9. You see, the prophet asked, really, can newborn babes weaned from their mother's breast grasp what is taught? Do spiritual leaders have to be taught like children? Lest they be instructed, precept upon precept, much like in an elementary school, the repetition of the same truths over and over again. And so Isaiah is asking, are my people so ignorant, so foolish, that even the prophets and the priests must be taught as though they are children? In verse 10, we read again the same thought. Can the people only grasp baby talk? Here a little and there a little. Well, having rejected the Torah, which is the Pentateuch, Israel truly had lost its way as a nation. Well, because they rejected the prophets, the Lord declared He would speak to His people, and I quote, with stammering lips and another tongue, another language. And that tongue, of course, was the language of Assyria. And then we read a warning not to the northern kingdom, which we've just finished, but now verses 14 through 22, a warning to the southern kingdom. Now, beginning with verse 14, Isaiah directed his prophecy to Judah, and despite that nation's sins and the incompetence of its leaders, we know that from history, Judah survived another century before falling to northern Israel's fate. In verse 14, after rejecting the prophet's warnings, Judah's leaders had, in effect, according to verse 15, made a pact with death and hell. You see, in verse 15, they came to believe their lies. You know, I've observed in this day that you and I live that pathological liars do come to believe their lies. Well, nevertheless, the Lord promised He would, quote, lay in Zion, Zion being the location of Jerusalem, that He would lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. And we read in verse 16, He that believeth shall not make haste. Now, we know that Jerusalem was the capital city of Judah, was destined for destruction. And yet, though the people would be led away to Babylon, Isaiah assured the people that the Lord would not forsake them, and His kingdom would endure. Now, Isaiah 28 and verse 16 is, I believe, a messianic prophecy that was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, whom the New Testament scriptures reveal as the rock and the cornerstone. Of course, the Jews rejected Christ at His first coming, and the Gentiles crucified Him. However, He is coming again, and it will come to pass that, quote, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. Matthew 21 and verse 42. Well, that brings us briefly to Isaiah chapter 29. Now, from the shepherd, I want to impart this to you. To understand Isaiah 29, when you read Ariel, A-R-I-E-L, when you read Ariel, think of Jerusalem. For Ariel literally meant the lion of God. And we read in Isaiah 29 and verse 1 that Ariel was the city where David dwelt. So we know that it is a prophecy regarding Jerusalem. Well, beginning in Isaiah 29 and verses 1 through 8, we have a warning of judgment. Now, Isaiah 29 and verses 1 through 14 recorded God's warning of imminent judgment against Jerusalem, Judah's capital. Now, hard times were ahead, and the Lord, identifying with Assyria as a tool of His judgment, declared, and I quote, I will distress Ariel, meaning Jerusalem, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow. I will camp against thee round about, and will lay siege against thee with a mount, and I will raise forts against thee. Isaiah 29 and verse 3. Now listen, that prophecy was fulfilled with the siege of Jerusalem by the army of Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Well, the citizens of Jerusalem were to be humiliated, we read in verse 4, and their speech became a whisper. The Lord, however, promised He would intervene for His people, and He vowed to strike fear into their enemies, quote, with thunder and with earthquake and with great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire in verse 6. You see, it wasn't going to be an army, but God Himself that would attack Assyria. The dream of the nations to overthrow Jerusalem and conquer Judah would become, in verse 7, a nightmare. Well, because prophecy often has an immediate and a far-reaching implication, I believe Isaiah 29 verses 6 through 8 describe not only the doomed siege of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, that's recorded in 2 Kings 19 and 2 Chronicles 32, but I believe also we're reading that which was a description of a future prophecy, a gathering of the nations against Jerusalem that will not be fulfilled until the battle of Armageddon. Well, let's come back to the drunken debauchery and 3 indictments. Now, we've seen in the opening verses of Isaiah 28 the drunken debauchery and the judgment that is pronounced against Israel, the northern 10 tribes. Now our attention turns to chapter 29 and verse 9 through 16, where we read about the debauchery and the 3 indictments against Judah, the southern kingdom. Now, the drunken debauchery of Jerusalem, we read, invited 3 indictments against the people. Now, the first, they were spiritually desensitized and became spiritually lethargic, verses 9 through 12. They were, secondly, hypocrites, for though they were ignorant of God's truth, Isaiah 29, 11 through 12, yet they continued to speak of the Lord with their lips. And they rejected the law and the commandments, and they followed the precepts of men. And then thirdly, lastly, they presumed they could hide their sins from the Lord in verse 15 and manipulate Him with their words. Well, a closing thought for today's devotion. Isaiah 29 and verses 15 through 24 served as a reminder that the God of heaven is sovereign creator, and nothing escapes His knowledge or is beyond His control. The people of Judah were foolish, and they believed the Lord had no knowledge of their schemes and sins that they committed in secret, according to verse 15. And so Isaiah reasoned with Judah, as the potter's clay cannot rise against the potter, man should not be so foolish to think he can assert himself against God and say in verse 16, He made me not. Well, Isaiah 29 verse 17 through 24, I believe is a picture of Christ's millennial kingdom, which He will establish after His second coming. And so Isaiah prophesied that when the Lord rules the earth and reigns from His throne in Jerusalem, that the desert of Lebanon will thrive with fruit. The deaf will hear, and the blind will see. Isaiah 29 and verse 18. And then finally, and the meek and the poor will rejoice. Verse 18. What a glorious day that will be. And so I close with a question for you, and it is, are you ready for the Lord's coming? It may be today. Well, thank you for being a part of Heart of a Shepherd. God bless you, and bye-bye.